Hi guys, good afternoon everybody. How you all doing? Hi Obina. Yeah, Obina, you're muted. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, can you hear me, Martin? Good afternoon.
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going?
No bad, no bad.
Awesome. So good to have you here.
Yeah, same here.
Um, Great. If you can turn on your camera, that would be very helpful. So we can just get the conversation started. How's it going?
Right. Yeah, no bad, no bad.
Awesome. So John will be joining us in a bit. He's actually in transit at the moment, and I'm hoping that his plane is able to land and he joins us shortly. I think there was a bit of delay with his flight, I guess.
Right. Okay.
So he'll be joining us shortly. But before he joins in, I would like us to just dive right into the conversation. And when he joins, obviously we can pick up from he can pick up from wherever we are at the time. Is that fine?
Yeah, that works. That's fine.
Okay, I'd like to just set a bit of context around the conversation while we dive in. The truth is, across African markets,
Mm,
um, there's been, I would say, very by and large solid conversations around other segments of real estate, construction, and infrastructure. So there's been conversation around the services side, the land side, actual construction on site, infrastructure. But beneath all of these sub segments of the market, there's been a very, or rather, there is a very key segment or of the market that people rarely talk about, but that holds so much value in terms of how projects are, whether projects are delivered, whether they are delivered in time, whether they are delivered within quality metrics that were defined, or whether they are delivered, within budget. And that is supply chain, honestly. And the objective of this conversation is to help, people who are joining this conversation on LinkedIn understand supply chain as a core driver of real estate and infrastructure value delivery within the African context. And so a lot of the conversation will dive deep into some of the things you are seeing that is working as
mm-hmm.
a procurement lead with experience across real estate and construction, and also some of the challenges that the sector in general is, experiencing. And so that is really what the conversation is gonna be about. And so before we dive in, I'll just, give you a few minutes to give a bit of background on yourself, especially your experience within the procurement value chain, and if possible, the book you just launched newly. So in 1 minute or two, before we dive right into the conversation.
Okay. Um, so I think I would need to. I'm having bad light now, so I need to take this video out.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so first of all, of course, my name is Obin Awudu, right? So I've done procurement and supply chain for 12 years now. Um, I've I've worked. I would say I've worked across construction and telecoms, basically, right? Most of my experience will be in construction extensively, and in these 12 years, I've done um, a lot of work around strategic procurement, inventory optimization, and supply chain risk management. Of course, I am also the co-founder of the Young Supply Chain Professional Community of Nigeria. And with that community, we are building a very deep and exposed community of young professionals that are highly mentored to offer value to the private and public sectors in Africa. All right. For since we are narrowing to construction, um, in in construction, I've had to work around. Like I said earlier, I've done a lot of sourcing and tenders, um, And when I am reporting these tenders, I have to, of course, speak to procurement management committees,
Mm-hmm.
and then, looking at all of the lessons and learnings that I have, just, let me say, learned from working with this, of course, with the leaders in these same committees. Most of them having commercial experience or financial experience, and a few of them to having technical experience. I realized that how we, pre-qualify and select suppliers for construction projects, of course, goes beyond the dashboards and the technology or the data, more so to the human psychology of things. And I will be speaking around it today. And of course, that's what, made, or that was in fact the reason why I decided to, come up with procurement psychology. All right. This book, for example, was published by the Scholars Press, and so currently we are selling good numbers of copies on Amazon. Yes, but it's something that I would advise everyone to, to get as well. The link is somewhere on my LinkedIn, and if we connect, I can always I can always share as well. So construction procurement is offers a very deep sense to the exposures of forex volatility, of the fact that we think our biggest exposures um, is around commercial, it's around
Mm-hmm.
commercial considerations. When in the real sense, it's not really always around commercial considerations. We have quality considerations as well. We have technical qualifications. We also have lead time considerations as well. So I'm hoping that in the course of this conversation, we would have course or time to speak on all of these things, right? So that's a summary of what I can say for now.
Thank you, Obina, and that's quite expensive. You touched on a number of things, but I'd like you to double down um, on the psychological aspect of procurement. Now, I think procurement is one of the very overlooked business functions, especially in our client. You have businesses running multi-million naira, multi-billion naira, you know, projects. You have businesses running multi-million dollar projects without a procurement function, whether in-house or outsourced, right? And you said it clearly. There is a psychology to procurement that a lot of businesses and a lot of um, business promoters don't agree with or don't align with. And what you find is people running very high stake, high risk projects, capital intensive projects, without paying attention necessarily to procurement and the value procurement, delivers in whether delivering business or helping delivering projects or helping businesses deliver, the expected outcome. And I want you to just touch on what, from your experience, has been the reason behind this mindset of seeing procurement as not a strategic function within a business or within a project, and more like businesses believing that they can deliver value at that scale without procurement.
Okay, so I think it will be from the beginning. I think the beginning is it started out as purchasing, right, which was more administrative. So now that procurement is moving from, or has moved from purchasing to procurement, which is a more strategic, um, position.
Mm-hmm.
It's now, it requires some level of change and adaptability. And when a lot of people have gotten used to seeing something a certain way, it then becomes a little different to see it in a more strategic way. So
Yeah.
the expectation is, and of course, this is not only with respect to the construction industry as well. It
Yeah.
also affects many other industries, and that is that procurement professionals themselves need to become absolutely strategic so that they can get a seat on the table. And then, how do you become strategic? You become strategic when you are providing solutions that C-level executives can understand. You speak the language of your board. You speak the language of your MD or CEO, and you're not just declaring hard or soft savings that honesty even your finance team cannot track. So a successful procurement and supply chain team is one that's absolutely that has a very high level of traceability, right? And all of the resilient solutions that you have put in place, the successes that you record are are obvious, right? So they're obvious, and any meeting or any table you sit on, you can speak to those value additions, and it will be recognized at every given time. So we need to move from administrative people and become strategic people, and
Yeah.
that's where procurement itself can get the respect that it truly deserves, because for 6 years I've continued to say one phrase, and that phrase is that procurement and supply chain is the heartbeat of commercial success in the 21st century. Without procurement and supply chain, every industry, even though we're going to be speaking more about the construction industry today, but every industry that optimizes their procurement and supply chain will, of course, reap very fantastic benefits, all right, that will cover across everything that the business or industry has to offer.
That makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. I think not just for procurement, for even other business functions, there has been a shift in mindset, or rather, there is an ongoing shift in mindset that is happening from just businesses seeing certain functions not as a well now and or not as an administrative function, like rightly put it, to more strategic function. But you can agree with me that that shift in mindset cannot fully happen except except value is clearly communicated in a very strategic way. And I'd like you to touch on value creation, in procurement as a business function. Where are you seeing the most value? Because if you look at the African construction and real estate landscape, there are multiple layers to, the different, I would say, different aspects of a project. So there is the material sourcing, there is the human resource management, or what I would say talent, or yeah, human resource talent, or what you probably call expertise, right? And then there are other layers. Where are you seeing the most value? And where are you seeing procurement driving the most value in particularly real estate and construction businesses? And how are you seeing that shift in mindset happening, across the industry from your experience?
Okay, so when I look at value, I would honestly tilt towards optimizing the quality management systems, right? Um, Procurement and supply chain in Africa must offer, uh, must give a fantastic quality outlook, right? We want to ensure that if that what we are bringing, or what a procurement professional is bringing to the value that a procurement professional or the procurement profession is bringing to an organization or to an industry is absolute quality. Quality is paramount to competitiveness. All right. And for for where Africa is currently, like you have rightly said, if Africa needs to compete globally and build supply chain resilience, you know, have that sort of authority that we must have, and
Mm-hmm.
that's relevant that the resources that we have abound needs to give us, then quality management systems need to be optimized. Now we would say, how do we? So, in to bring a few things home and just sort of try to merge too many conversations into one, I would say that when how to understand quality is looking at it from the early involvement. We
Mm.
consider procurement engagement from the material requirement planning phase, right? What do you require? How are you mapping? What's your source mapping strategy? And then from there, your strategic sourcing activities, and then from there you're asking yourself, okay, do you need a bit of R&D? And then you can then do initial strategic sourcing, and then you move to what you can call R&D, and then maybe demand forecasting where necessary. Again, not always the same type of flow. It may differ from industry to industry. And
Industry,
then,
yeah.
yeah, so then are you forecasting? Then after you're forecasting, you move to the main phase of your procurement, right? And then you do your strategic sourcing end to end, of course, understanding of all of the elements that are involved in strategic sourcing. And then we then also, in fact, down to when the finished product is complete. And
Mm-hmm.
from a quality offering, we are saying that let us not look at quality as something that we can go to one stage. So let's see the post, during, and the final. Okay, let's not look at quality as something that we should only consider as a post consideration, or a final consideration, or looking at it when we have the finished good. Let us look at quality as something that if we don't start well,
That
we won't
reflects
end well.
throughout the
Yes,
face of the
exactly.
project.
So we're saying that if if I have a QMS flow, I want to say, if I want a quality finished material, I must have quality raw material, and
Absolutely.
and then I have quality raw material. I must ensure that I have quality WIP. So,
Absolutely.
and then from quality WIP, that's when I can have a quality finished good. I won't have bad raw material and then end up having a reasonable finished good, right? The same way, if I want to have a fantastic fresh pineapple juice, I can't achieve that when I have
Have a routine final.
a damaged, a rotten pineapple. I'm not going to have a fresh. So it's this same logic that we can also bring to procurement and its quality considerations. So when we place the bar for quality high, we compete better, and then Africa can then come and take its place as a global leader in procurement and supply chain optimization.
I like how you explain it. I think quality is something that must be tracked across the life cycle of a project or of a business, whatever it is. Like you rightly
Absolutely.
mentioned, it is what the input that determines what the output is going to look like. And it's very important to that you mentioned that, because from raw materials to the quality of the expertise. And when I mean expertise, like the quality of the contract, contractors working or the artisans working on the project, all of that, and the quality of planning, which is the WIP sort of that you mentioned, all of that culminate in delivering an eventual quality product or project at the end of the day. But I like you to talk about it from the other side of the conversation. So if you look at the African market, for the most part, let's even just use Nigeria as an instance. As an instance, a lot of project sponsors here, mostly like if you're talking construction or real estate delivery, you're talking developers. Um, to them, value to them, I would say they prioritize value that is either cost saving, um,
Okay.
more than quality of project, right? So a lot of developers, when you're having procurement conversation with them, they value cost savings more than, I mean, procurement delivering cost savings on projects than procurement delivering quality projects, right? And I'd like you to talk about it. I know from like a strategic layer, the ideal thing would be to deliver quality at the end of the day, right? But with a market where things are super volatile, people are already dealing with, high levels of risk, high level of inflation and escalation in cost and all of those things. And so for some segments of the market across the continent, the stakeholder perspective of value will be tilted more to cost saving than quality.
Yeah.
In your experience, in that play.
Okay. So, I mean, what you said is absolutely right. I've had to just fight to a lot of business leaders over the years. Why quality is in itself cheaper than going for example, substandard materials,
Mhm.
long term. So when we talk about strategic procurement, we are looking at long term value. And so, from where I sit, I am happily one of the professionals championing total value orchestration for procurement globally. And this is because if we total value orchestration is transitioning from what we call TCO. TCO is total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
Now, right. So now total cost of ownership is by layman definition, right? For of course the non-procurement professionals on the call
Yeah.
is the cost, all associated and related costs for the life cycle of that material or that equipment or service. So
For
that's
project.
life cycle, yes, or a project, right? And we must realize that sometimes buying it cheaper today doesn't necessarily mean that it is cheaper. So let me explain. Okay, I give two. I have I finished the construction of a five five story residential real estate project, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I they bring the uh, the requisition that we want to get a generator. So after we do the energy audit, we decide to go for an 80 kVA generator. Okay, and we are uh, looking at uh, getting this 80 kVA generator because, of course, we are in Nigeria and we would have power issues. So it is an absolute need, right? It is something that is absolutely needed. So it is now past the phase of should we buy or should we not buy? We know that it is absolutely necessary. Okay. And then we are now looking at TCO. That's total cost of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I have option one. Okay. For the sake of this illustration, we use only two, even though practically we always compare more than two. So we use only two so that we are a bit brief and concise. So option one, in terms of initial procurement cost, we say to acquire the gen set is 50 million naira. Right. Option two, we to say to acquire is 72 million naira or 75 million naira. And then maybe when we have a quotation analysis, someone looks at this and says, 50M is a better option. Why are we throwing away 25 million naira? Right? And then everybody that's in their mind is a logical conversation. 25 million, 50% increase, it doesn't make any sense. Why are we buying that? Okay, now let us try to flip it. Okay, the maintenance cost for option one, so the monthly, again, we're just giving illustrations. The monthly maintenance cost for option one is 1 million naira, or let me say 2 million naira monthly maintenance cost of option one. Option two maintenance cost is 200,000 naira. It means that by the end of year one, the total cost that we'll have spent on option two will be around, maybe if we add 2.4, around 2.4 million to, that's around 77.4 million naira. And then we would have 74 million naira on option one. So by the end of year one, we have only 3 million naira difference between option two and option one. By the end of Q3, by the end of Q2, in the second year after purchase, we realize that the spend of option one is already more than the spend of option two. And this is an equipment that everybody, the people that signed off on that purchase, are hoping to use this equipment or assets, are hoping to use it for at least 10 to 15 years, at least. So now, by the time you get to the end of the second year, you're already losing money. Third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, seventh. By the end of the 12th year, you have made a very terrible financial decision, just because your only thoughts, or what you had in your what do we call that, magnifying glass, was
it was this year
50% savings now, today. So it goes beyond the superficial analysis. It goes beyond everything. It's more about deeper consideration to long-term vision, strategic procurement in itself. Are we buying for now? Are we buying for the future? What are we looking at, in all honesty? What do we want to achieve with the acquisition of this equipment? And that in itself will drive your decision. Because most times, with this,
I agree with you, Obina, and that was a very good analysis. But I feel like in practice, there are more layers to procurement decision and supply chain in general. For instance, what if a business is looking to prioritize cash flow in the immediate? And they obviously, all of these, a lot of businesses quite understand, but a lot of times they honestly cannot, for cash flow constraint, think long term. And I think that's even I say that those are like very good situations. But then you also have, and I'm bringing this back to real estate development and construction, you also have developers who, for, I would say, cost savings and shareholder value maximization, just don't see the need to, they don't see the need to look long term. So what I mean is, if you find a developer that is building 5 stories of maybe like 10 units of 2 bedroom, and he's deciding whether to choose a material that will deliver more value, obviously in long term, that's your TVO perspective, versus using a more inferior material that gets the job done, and obviously he's not looking to run this asset for another 10, 20 years. He's looking to offload this asset within the next 6 to 12 months, or 6 to 18 months, and move on to another project. So, from a procurement standpoint, it will be more difficult for you to convince that guy to think long term, because long term is not is not in his foresight or things that he's considering at the moment. He's looking to deliver this with as I mean as best as he can, and then offload the asset, recoup his capital, and go do another one. So, from your perspective, how can we begin to influence some of these conversations for people beyond just cash flow constraints, people to think more long term in terms of what is the value that they are creating long term, versus just thinking in the short term and delivering inferior products in the market? And how can procurement begin to enforce like this mindset in real life?
Okay, so I, I think that's a fantastic question. Um, the reality is, which I've of course always said, is I think generally in Africa, I think we do value engineering wrong. I think that we when especially looking at from like we've said a real estate standpoint, where we need to if the conversation or if the outlook is more short term than long term, what we can be looking forward to do is now going back, to the requisition, right? And then now ensuring that value engineering is done from best alternative navigation. From we cannot massage anybody's ego, or we cannot solve problems. We cannot sit down, waste our time, and discuss problems that probably have no solutions. You just have to do what you have to do. For example, so if a developer wants to embark on a project, and we have a better alternative navigation map because we want to do value engineering due to budget constraints that's allowing him not speak long term, what we do is we check the dream. So the dream is, if you had money, if you had money, what would you do? That's the dream, all right? And then we can then look at all those specifications, list out those specifications in terms of core and not necessary, what we can do without. So is this a core requirement? Is this requirement absolutely critical? And so if that is absolutely critical, then that now has to move in as to that best alternative navigation map as something that must absolutely be done. So let's say we have 10 specifications, a list of 10 things. After we do that, we then value engineer, and then we say major, number one major, number two major, number three major, number four major, and then number five medium. When we do that, the ones that are minor means that they don't really affect, and sometimes some minors affect the cost. For
Yeah.
example, a minor is a brand. So sometimes if I may want a fantastic socket, right, to do finishing of a nice three-bedroom flat, and I can get great Schneider sockets or great ABB sockets for a reasonable price that I can afford. I don't need to really go Legrand, right? I don't need to go Legrand, for example. So if minor is brand, then we can change the brand. But if it's other major considerations that will affect again the quality output of what we are trying to build, then I would just tell such a developer that, sir, or my oga, or whatever I would refer to the person as, and I'll say, see, as it is now, it is possible that we are not ready for this project, because the core requirements especially with the fact that we are pushing quality and TVO out there, is these are the core requirements. If you can't meet this base, then there's not much that we can do. There is nothing to compromise, and we
Yeah.
cannot compromise that. However, if we have medium and minor things there, when we have, of course, done that granular analysis to break that specification down, then we can then begin to replace and say, okay, we don't need brand. Okay, he doesn't need to have this sort of aesthetic. Doesn't need to have this, and then if it's not going to affect the functionality uh, and the essence of why we actually need that, then fine. But if it will and is a major consideration, then we should just say this at this time, right? At this time, maybe that developer is not ready to take on this particular project. Maybe that project, the dream, the expectation, everything else needs to be revisited.
I mean, I hear you, Obi, now, but a lot of times, some of these developers, they don't think the way you are thinking. But I totally understand. And I would like us to take this conversation is a step back to just understand what has been your experience in terms of managing stakeholders, internal stakeholders, particularly from a procurement standpoint. And to give a bit of context, this is where my thought process is coming from. Procurement clearly delivers value within teams and for projects. But one of the major hindrances that I've personally experienced is getting buy-in from the internal team, especially when there is existing personal interest
Mm-hmm.
and shenanigans going on within a business or a company, especially with senior management who have interest in not making procurement happen. It is against their interest. It's against their ongoing shenanigans for procurement to work. And so they become one of the biggest resistance to deploying procurement at scale across organizations, especially in the public sector. But we are even seeing more of it even in recent times within the procurement, within the private sector. What has been your interest, your experience rather, in managing internal interest um, that is um, I would say counterproductive to efficient procurement system or supply chain system deployment within an organization? What has your experience been, and what is the best way to navigate it?
So the best way to navigate that, like we said, is the theme of this conversation. It's basically building systems and structures around it. It just sort of it will navigate, it will mitigate rather, um, help you navigate these constraints a little easier. However, can we fully eradicate? I sitting here, I won't be wishy-washy and say yes, it can be fully eradicated. But I know that with systems, processes, structure, it can we can have some level of sanity, right? Now, if the first thing to I've built strategic procurement departments in three organizations throughout my career, and two of them are multinationals. And one of the first things that I did when I joined those organizations was to ensure that we had a procurement standard operating system. Now that SOP just sort of
What does that what does that mean?
so a standard operating system is a process document that contains, of course, the processes in that. So the processes, how to engage procurement, right? How the procurement would do purchasing or would do procurement or goods and service acquisition, how the procurement team would do supplier qualification, how the procurement team would do supplier portfolio management, performance evaluation for vendors and suppliers, just everything basically that the procurement team should or is expected to coordinate or champion will be in that procurement SOP. And having that, getting, of course, the management to sign off on that process document and put it in effect is of course the first step. That way you can mandate some stage gates. So if you already have approved processes and this is now the way to go, it will be that, okay, based on this threshold, this must happen, based on this trigger, this must happen, and then you can then mandate these stage gates in line with, of course, the system integration and structures that will also happen simultaneously. So that system now becomes that SOP or systems that we're creating now becomes the backbone that even protects the procurement department. Many SOPs even also have the whistleblowing policy, right? When you see anti-bribery and corruption, how do you
How do
whistleblow?
you do this in the first place? Because
So
from my experience, where you have this interest that we are talking about in these businesses who are even mostly at management level, they stage-gate this from even happening in the first place. So I don't know if you understand what I mean.
okay,
Because,
so if
and I've seen it happen in the public sector, I've seen it happen in the private sector, right? So
so
how do you even get in the door?
I'll be on, I'll be honest, one answer won't fix private and public sector. Public sector, taking the Nigerian context, um, will be a bit more dicey, a bit more difficult, because of course we have very strict layers of bureaucracy in the public sector. And before you can get these sign-offs, you can't, before you get the sign-off, it's more complex that you won't even be able to, break or impose these stage gates. So for public sector, maybe we need a 3-hour brainstorming session on how to tackle what I'll call procurement system hindrances, right? But for private sector, it's much easier because there's structure, and most times what can make it a little different too is who procurement and supply chain reports to. So there are some organizations where if procurement and supply chain reports to the CFO, and we know that we'll have more financial clarity, and there is a very high chance that from an operations, or let's take a construction company context, from project and design or estimation team, right? So from the COO and the design directors or architects team, we would see that you'd have more financial clarity and you have more margin protection from a procurement standpoint. However, you would not be able to probably have the best technical protection. So,
Yeah.
you now see that when it's time to execute, you can be declaring higher margins, but the fraud has already happened even from requisition and BOQ stage. So, and of course, CPU agenda says that 70% of procurement fraud happens at specification stage. That's where all of the padding happens. So the truth is, if procurement doesn't have early involvement and cannot create some level of control there, it's going to be almost impossible to eradicate that fraud. And that's why I said earlier that, can we eradicate? Are we where I can say we can eradicate? Honestly, I don't think we're there yet. But from a private sector standpoint, compared to the public sector, private sector is better, just simply because of course, the different realities of where procurement and supply chain reports to, gives you that level
Yeah.
of protection. Yes, determinants, right? So it determines what you are exposed to. But for public sector, the different layers of bureaucracy just makes it excessively rigid. So systems, procedures, and structures will guide to the level of potency that it has reached. So if the
Mm-hmm.
systems are deep enough to give you that firm level of potency, then great. If it's not deep enough, then that's when we can see that yes, a few things will slip through the cracks and if everything will be caught. But regardless of what it is better currently, even though we are not there yet, but it is better to have those procurement and supply chain systems that at least can curb what it can curb rather than to not have at all because we are not sure of how great it will be.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing I picked from what you said is the fact that who is backing procurement within an organization matters even
Absolutely.
more than anything else, right? Because if there is, if there is buying from, I would say, management of a company. When I say management in this context, like the CEO of a company,
Yeah.
if there's buying to clean up their supply chain, process and make it transparent, that will most likely work. If there is buying from a CFO, for instance, that might work. But if it is further down the line and there is interest from higher authorities, that will most likely never work. And
Of course.
you mentioned something that is very critical, just the importance of getting procurement involved in the early stages of a project. Because, like you rightly mentioned, more than 70% of procurement fraud and supply chain in general fraud happen even before vendors are engaged. It happens before vendors are engaged.
Yeah.
That's the pattern you're talking about, and all of those things. And it then raises the question of the level of technical competence that is required from procurement to be able to begin to catch a lot of these things. If they're involved early stage, we are talking design. How, what level of technical competence is procurement required to have to be able to catch things like excessive over designing, for instance, or over costing, for instance, or overestimating, and in all of those phases, and how does that translate for a young person, underscore who's looking to, have a career in procurement? How does what would be your advice on technical competence and how it translates, as a procurement function in real life?
Oh, okay, so I think success in procurement um,
Yeah, Obina, can you hear me? Yeah, you're back.
am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back. Can you hear me? You're back. Obina, can you hear me? You're back. I'm gonna turn off my video to see if it improves. Can you hear me? Hello? Hey, Obina, can you hear me? Hello, Obina.
Yes, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Can you hear me?
Confirm if you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Uh, yeah,
So you were
I
answering the
had,
question.
I don't know, I had, yeah. So please repeat the question again, sorry.
So you were answering the question around the the need to engage procurement at the early phases of a project, to make sure things are watertight and there's no other room for the inefficiencies that we're seeing in the market. And I wanted you to speak to it from the perspective of the level of technical competence that procurement is beginning to require to make sense of those early phases. So like design competence, understanding of design, understanding of estimation, and build preparation and all of those. Like you rightly mentioned, 70% of procurement fraud, quote unquote, happen before vendors are even engaged. So if you can touch through, you know, share some thoughts
Okay,
around
so
that, that would be
so the
helpful.
best, the best, the best in an ideal situation would say the best in terms of technical requirements or technical skills. So for for construction, the best procurement guy will probably be someone who don't quantities of.
Obina, hey, Obina,
Yeah,
are you
oh,
back?
Martin. Okay, yeah, I'm back now. I think I will just manage the bandwidth and not put the video because
Yes, yes.
it's. I think I'm
We'll just
having.
do a
Yeah, I think I'm
few.
having network. Yeah. Okay. So, like I was saying, an ideal situation, right? If we wanted to be again wishy-washy, would be that a solid procurement guy should have a background in building and quantity surveying, so that he can interpret drawings and do some off-taking. However, for now, this takes away this now starts to push procurement um, to a lot of generalism. So if you work in an industry, it will only make sense that you understand the most basic principles of that industry. So let me
Mm.
explain. If I don't have a degree in quantity surveying, but I know how to interpret a drawing, I may not necessarily know how to do measurements and do the off-take, but if I see a technical drawing or a concept drawing or whatever, I already know maybe not the square meterage, and that's where I can then seek help from a QS in my team if I need to speak to a QS in my team, or
Mm-hmm.
I can leverage some of the technology tools that we have now, that can even let me know if the takeoff that has been done from this drawing, for example, is correct, and if we've captured the amount square meter or whatever, right? So we don't want to say procurement guys should become generalists per se, but they should try to, be a successful procurement guy is the guy who knows a bit of everything, who knows his procurement well, but has good grasp of quantity surveying, has a good grasp of finance, of project operations, and how we can do project management, HSC, and just everything. Because,
Yeah.
and even of course contracts. For many years, a lot of people argue why contracts should not be done, why contracts should be done by a procurement person. But the truth is, today, the expectation is that contracts should be done by a procurement person and reviewed by the legal team. So not necessarily legal team drafting contracts. Now procurement should draft contracts because you should have contract management skills. So when we talk about skills, we are listing stakeholder management. We're listing technical skills. Let's list stakeholder management as soft skills, and let's say contract management, risk management, strategic sourcing, anything that just basically puts you in a position where you can think strategically, have deep in business foresight, procure to pay optimization. That's how you would engage with finance, and know all of your commercial terms, down from everything that has to do with when it gets to your doorstep, and even down to when the vendor or supplier is paid, and how to negotiate payment terms in line with cash flow, for example. These are the type of skills that you will require, as a procurement guy, in terms of technical skills. Yeah. And then when we move to soft skills too, because they are also equally important, you need to be able to manage stakeholders and you need to be able to bring people together, communicate effectively, absolutely effectively, so that there are no gaps in terms of the execution. Because a proper MRP flow would be that the design team speaks well to the quantity surveyor, and the quantity surveyor speaks well to procurement, and procurement speaks well to project operations in parallel, and the site team, and also speaks well to the finance team.
Finance
Everybody on
and
the everyone else doing, and also speak well to legal as well, because they're the ones that are going to review and of course educate on some of the legally exposing terms in that that you've drafted on your contract. So I see a place where, if as a procurement guy you cannot coordinate effectively with stakeholders, you are not where you can beat your chest and say that you are going to succeed as a procurement guy. I don't see that happening, especially with the fact that, right now we are having a lot of further elimination of administrative tasks because of more effective ERPs and artificial intelligence, and
yeah.
so the more of the admin guys are going out. So if you're not doing, if you are just sending out RFQs, comparing quotes, and doing and raising POs without necessarily doing that sort
Obina, we are losing you again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you for a few
Okay.
seconds.
Okay. So if we are of course like I said, doing everything that in all honesty, needs to be done, then we it means that such a person just has to integrate really well with all of these stakeholders. And this one makes the soft skills equally important, just as much as the technical skills as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Obina. It's been a pleasure engaging with you on this conversation. Because of our time, I think we are 7 minutes past the
Right.
time. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure
It's a
hearing your
pleasure.
perspective on the
Yeah,
market, and I hope we'll catch up again sometime soon.
absolutely.
Thank you.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.